Let me tell you something that took me nearly 25 years of practice to fully understand. And I say this as a doctor who has sat across from thousands of couples, most of them in the second half of their lives, many of them well past 70, and some in their 80s still trying to figure out what went wrong in the bedroom 40 years ago. My name is Dr. Ava Remington. I've spent over 2 decades in private practice, first in Boston, then down here in Charleston, South Carolina, working with men and women who thought their best years were behind them. And I'm here to tell you today, if you're listening to me right now and you're 60, 70, even 75 years old, that you are not too late. You are not broken, and you are not alone. I want to begin with a question, and I want you to really sit with it before you answer. Do you actually know your wife's body? I don't mean do you know where things are. I mean, do you know how she feels? What makes her close her eyes? What makes her exhale? What makes her hand reach for yours without thinking? Because in all my years of practice, I found that most men, good men, honorable men who've been faithful husbands for 40 and 50 years, still don't know the answer to that question. And it's not their fault. Nobody ever taught them. Most men of your generation were taught that intimacy was an act, something you did, something with a beginning, a middle, and an end. You were never taught that it's a language, a conversation between two bodies that have known each other for decades, but somehow never really spoke. And that's the tragedy I see every single week in my office. Not impotence, not medication side effects, not age. The real tragedy is silence. Let me tell you about a gentleman I'll call Walter. Walter came to see me about 3 years ago. He was 74, a retired engineer from Greenville, and he sat down in my office with his hat in his hands like he was about to confess to something terrible. He told me he'd had prostate surgery 4 years earlier. Since then, he hadn't been able to perform. He was on blood pressure medication, a mild painkiller for his back, and something for acid reflux. He told me, and I'll never forget this, Doc, I feel like a criminal in my own marriage. I don't deserve her anymore. I hear this story so often it breaks my heart every time. Men who carry shame around like a second skin, convinced they've failed their wives because one particular function of their body no longer works the way it did when they were 30. And what I told Walter, I'm going to tell you right now. Your wife did not marry an erection. She married a man. And a man is so much more than one organ. Here's what the research actually tells us, and this is where most men get it wrong. A woman's body has, on average, 10 times more sensory receptors than a man's. 10 times. But here's the catch, and this is the part nobody explains. Those receptors don't activate the same way yours do. The signal has to travel through her emotional state first, before her body can even register pleasure. If she's anxious, if she's holding resentment from something you said last Tuesday, if she's worried about the grandkids, if she doesn't feel safe or seen or adored in that moment, her nervous system is literally blocking the pleasure signal before it can reach her brain. Think about that. Her body could be perfectly healthy, perfectly capable, and yet feel absolutely nothing if her heart isn't open. That's not a flaw. That's how she's designed. And once you understand this, everything changes. So when men ask me, and they ask me all the time, Doctor, where's the spot? Where do I touch? Where's the magic button? I tell them the truth. The most important place to touch your wife isn't between her legs. It's between her ears. It's her mind, her sense of being valued, her sense of being chosen still after all these years. I had a man in my office last month, 81 years old, who told me something so beautiful I wrote it down. He said, Dr. Remington, I finally figured it out. I spent 50 years trying to give my wife pleasure, and it turns out all she ever wanted was for me to look at her the way I did on our wedding day. That's the secret. That's the whole book in one sentence. Now, I want to get practical with you because I know some of you are listening and thinking, that's all fine, doctor, but what do I actually do? So let me walk you through this step by step, the way I walk my patients through it in my office. The first thing, and I cannot stress this enough, is you have to start the conversation long before you ever get to the bedroom. If the only time you touch your wife is when you want something, she knows. She's known for years. And her body has learned to brace itself, to become a fortress, not because she stopped loving you, but because she learned to protect herself from the feeling of being used. So start in the morning, start at breakfast. When she pours your coffee, put your hand on hers and just say, thank you. Not a big production, not a speech, just thank you. Look her in the eye. That small gesture, repeated every day for a month, will do more for your intimate life than any pill you could ever take. Touch her during the day without expecting anything. Brush her hair back from her face when she's reading. Rest your hand on her shoulder when you walk past her in the kitchen. These are what I call non-demanding touches, and they're medicine. They tell her nervous system, slowly and patiently, that your hands are safe again. That being close to you doesn't come with a price tag. I know this sounds slow. I know some of you are thinking, Doc, I'm 73, I don't have time for all this. But I'm telling you, this is the shortcut. This is the actual shortcut. The men who rush this step spend years frustrated. The men who embrace this step find their marriages coming alive in ways they thought were over forever. Now, let's talk about what happens when you do move closer physically. Most men touch the way they were taught by magazines and movies, which is to say, they touch the way a teenager thinks touching should work. Fast, direct, goal-oriented. Your wife, whether she's 50 or 75, does not need that. She probably never did. The area you've likely been focusing on for your entire married life is not actually where a woman's most sensitive tissue lives. The most responsive area, the one with the highest concentration of those sensory receptors I mentioned, sits slightly above the opening in a small raised area that most men have been trained to overlook, and even then direct pressure on that spot is usually too much. What she actually responds to is indirect attention, circles around it, a feather-light touch nearby, patience, pauses. The space between touches matters as much as the touches themselves. And here's where I have to say something that might surprise some of you. Your tongue, your fingertips, your breath near her ear, the slow weight of your hand resting on her hip without moving, all of these are more powerful than any acrobatics. The goal is not to perform. The goal is to listen with your hands. Ask her. I know the generation I'm speaking to was raised to believe that a real man just knows. But let me tell you something. The strongest, most confident men I've ever treated are the ones who are brave enough to ask, does this feel good? Do you want me to keep going? Is there somewhere you'd rather I touch? That's not weakness. That's the highest form of strength because it requires you to set aside your ego in service of her pleasure. Now I want to speak directly to those of you who are dealing with health issues. The men who've had prostate surgery, the men on blood pressure medication, on blood thinners, on antidepressants, on painkillers. I see you. I hear you. I know the shame you carry, and I need you to hear me very carefully right now. Your worth as a husband has nothing to do with whether you can achieve an erection. Nothing. Zero. Your wife, if she's been with you for decades, does not measure you by that. She measures you by your kindness, by your presence, by whether you still see her. And there are so many ways to bring her pleasure that don't require that particular function at all. Walter, the gentleman I told you about earlier, came back to see me 6 months after our first conversation. He told me he'd stopped focusing on what his body couldn't do and started focusing on what it still could. He'd spent those 6 months learning his wife's body all over again, with his hands, with his mouth, with his full attention. And his wife, who hadn't let him touch her in years because she'd gotten tired of feeling like a project that failed, had started reaching for him in her sleep. He cried in my office when he told me. I don't mind telling you I cried a little too. There's no age limit on this. I want to be very clear about that. I've had patients in their late 80s come back to life this way. I've had women who told me at 72 that they had their first real experience of pleasure in their lives. Let that sink in. A whole lifetime of marriage, and they'd never felt what their body was capable of feeling because nobody had ever slowed down enough to meet them where they actually lived. And ladies, if you're listening, and I know some of you are, I want you to hear this. It is not too late for you either. Whatever you didn't feel for the first 50 or 60 years of your marriage is not a verdict on your body. Your body still works. Your body is still listening. You just need a partner who will listen back, and if he's willing to learn, you have to be willing to let him try. I want to address something that came up recently because I think it speaks to so many of you. A man wrote to me, heartbroken, saying he and his wife used to have warmth between them, and now they fight, that the tenderness is gone, that she treats him like an opponent instead of a partner, and he asked me, how do we get back what we had? Here's my honest answer. You don't get back what you had. You build something new. The couple you were at 30 is gone. That's not sad, that's just real. But the couple you are at 75 can have something deeper than anything you experienced back then. You have history, you have survival. You have shared grief and shared laughter and shared grandchildren. What you build now can go deeper than what you had because you've both been through so much. But it starts with an apology, not a long one, not a defensive one, just a simple, I know I haven't always known how to reach you. I want to learn if you'll let me. You'd be amazed what that one sentence can open up. And if she's angry, let her be angry. Don't argue, don't explain, just listen. I've seen men save their marriages in a single afternoon by simply sitting and listening to decades of hurt without trying to defend themselves. It takes enormous courage. It's harder than anything you did in your working life, but it's the work that matters now. Let me come back to the biology for a moment because I don't want you to think this is all touchy-feely. There's real science here. When a woman feels emotionally safe, her body releases oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone. Oxytocin increases blood flow to the tissues that create sensation. It lowers her heart rate, relaxes her muscles, and signals to her brain that it's okay to feel pleasure. Without that hormone, no amount of physical stimulation will work. And here's the beautiful part. Oxytocin is released by eye contact, by gentle touch, by laughter, by whispered words, by the sound of your voice saying her name the way you used to say it. So when I tell you that the pathway to her body runs through her heart, I'm not being poetic, I'm being clinical. That's literally how her nervous system works. This is also true for you, by the way. Men have oxytocin too. And as you age, testosterone drops, which means oxytocin becomes even more important for you to feel connected and aroused. The men who stay warm and affectionate with their wives into their 70s and 80s report more intimacy, not less. The ones who go cold and silent report the opposite. Your body is trying to tell you something. It's asking you to lead with your heart. I want to talk briefly about medications because I got a lot of questions on this. Yes, blood pressure medication can affect performance. So can antidepressants, acid reflux drugs, and painkillers. If this is an issue for you, please talk to your primary care doctor. There are often alternatives. There are often adjustments that can be made. Don't suffer in silence. But also, and this is important, don't wait until the medication issue is solved to start rebuilding intimacy. The emotional work I'm describing doesn't require anything from your body except your presence. I want to leave you with something practical you can do tonight. Just tonight. Don't worry about tomorrow or next week. Just tonight. When you go to bed, don't reach for anything. Just lie close to her. Put your hand on her back and leave it there. Don't move it. Don't let it wander. Just let it rest. If she wants to talk, listen. If she wants to sleep, let her sleep. Do that for 7 nights in a row. Just 7. I promise you, something will shift. I have seen it happen hundreds of times in my practice. She will start to turn toward you in her sleep. She will start to hold your hand at dinner again. She will look at you across the room the way she used to. Not because you performed, but because you showed up. Because you stopped asking her body for anything and started offering her your presence instead. And when that shift happens, and only when it happens, you'll find that her body starts opening too. Not because you unlocked some secret technique, but because safety is the master key. Always was, always will be. I want to close with something one of my patients said to me, and I think about it almost every day. He was 83 years old, recently widowed after 56 years of marriage. He came to see me because he was grieving and couldn't sleep, and in the middle of our conversation he said, "You know what I miss the most? Not the big things, the small things. The way she'd rest her hand on my knee at church, the way she'd hum when she was cooking, the way she'd look at me when I walked into a room." And then he said, "I spent the first 20 years of our marriage chasing fireworks, and I didn't realize until the last 20 years that the real thing, the thing I'd give anything to have back, was her hand on my knee at church." Don't wait. Don't wait another day. The person lying next to you tonight is a gift you've been taking for granted, maybe without even realizing it. She doesn't need you to be the man you were at 30. She needs you to be the man you are at 70, fully present, fully tender, fully hers. You are not too old. You are not too broken. You are not too late. The body follows the heart, my friends. Always. If you're willing to relearn, willing to try, willing to wait, willing to listen, your body will follow your heart. And your marriage, in this late hour, can become something more beautiful than anything you've known. This is Dr. Ava Remington. Thank you for listening tonight. If this reached you, if something in it stirred something in you, I want you to know that this is the beginning, not the end. Go find her, sit beside her, take her hand, and start again